The Buccaneers snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget, you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you 5 days a week along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message, as well as complete and utter meltdowns over a former Illinois player in real time. You can do that by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Shout out to all of you in the live chat already. I know it's late, but we are going to talk about a huge Buccaneers win, biggest takeaways and game balls coming up a little bit later. Starting this one off with the biggest moment, and much like last week, it is really hard to pick the biggest moment. This was an ugly game after that first quarter. I had a couple people give me grief on Twitter about how I said this was going to be an ugly, nasty, low-scoring game, and then it started to look like it was going to be a shootout, and instead it was a nasty, ugly, low-scoring game. I mean, the quarterbacks were sacked a combined 7 times. Neither one turned the ball over, although Levante David dropped a sure pick that I'm sure he wishes he had back. But for this, the biggest moment was on 4th and 10 from their own 32-yard line and just a minute and 24 seconds remaining in the game. Baker Mayfield was looking for someone downfield. He had no one open. Then he takes off and runs for 15 yards and a first down. That was the ball game. That was it. You convert, you give yourself a chance. You miss it, the game's over. Baker, for as beat up as he was, we saw him grab his left leg after a sack in the first half. We saw him scramble and run and go down and grab his leg again. And then, of course, C.J. Gardner-Johnson wants to run off at the mouth, and that popped Baker right back onto his feet to jaw right back. But he put the team on his back once again and found a way to keep them alive. That was absolutely huge. After that, it was a completion to Cade Otton, a completion to Bucky Irving, another completion to Bucky Irving, a completion to Mike Evans, a completion to Cade Otton, and then the touchdown run by Rachaad White. After that first down run by Baker on 4th and 10, you just knew in your gut that Baker and the Bucs were going to find a way to win this game. And let me say this. While we're watching Josh Grizzard learn and grow as an offensive coordinator and a play caller, in the first 2 weeks of his career of an OC, the way he has been able to orchestrate and dial up the right plays in the first 2 weeks of this season to allow the Bucs to come from behind and win late in the fourth quarter is impressive. That is a sign of things to come, and he is not playing with a full deck right now. There is no Tristan Wirfs. There is no Luke Goedeke that I'll talk about in just a second. You don't have Chris Godwin. You don't have Jalen McMillan. Emeka Egbuka, you saw him on the sideline getting his leg wrapped up. I think that affected his play in the second half. He left a couple of plays out there. You are dealing with a lot of problems on this offense. But when it comes down to the most important moments, when it comes down to crunch time and the gotta have it drive, Grizzard and Baker have stepped up and done exactly what they needed to do to get the Bucs in the win column, and that has been huge. I think that's a great sign for what Josh Grizzard is going to bring the rest of the season as an offensive coordinator. I think it's a great sign about the trust and the belief that he and Baker have in one another to get done what they need to do. So I needed to give a little bit of a hat tip to Josh Grizzard. It was ugly on offense for a lot of the game, but that's not totally on Grizz. That was on the situation. But when it mattered most, they were able to get it done. But we do have to talk about these injuries. Luke Goedeke, I said in my live show, my live preview, that if Goedeke didn't play in this game, I felt like the Texans were going to win. Well, Goedeke leaves after re-aggravating that foot injury. And I started to think, I don't know if this Bucs offensive line can hold up against this Texans pass rush. Baker was sacked 4 times. He was hit multiple times. He was under duress for much of the game. So it was really, really spotty there for a while. No word on Goedeke's status. I have to think that he's probably, if he leaves with an injury on a Monday night, I have to believe that he's likely not going to be available to play on Sunday against the Jets. We're going to have to wait and see. But then the big one, Calijah Kancey. His arm was in a sling after the game. Bowles told the media that it looks like it might be serious. I looked, when the injury happened, you saw the replay. He was going, and then all of a sudden his arm just went completely limp. He's trying to, push and force his way past an offensive lineman, and it almost looked like his arm was just completely dead. Kind of like when you dislocate your shoulder and you can't move your arm around. That's what it looked like. So if it's a torn pec, and we dealt with this with Christian Izien, I believe it was Izien that had the torn pec during training camp, a normal tear, a moderate tear, I guess is what it was called, you're looking at about a 12-week recovery. If it's severe, he's done for the year. It's over. That's a 4 to 6 month recovery. So you're hoping, best case scenario, that this is a moderate tear and that he's going to be able to return in about 3 to 4 months, which would be just in time for the, probably the last week or two of the regular season, but back for the playoff push. But this is bad. Calijah Kancey is so good when he is available, when he's on the field, and he and Vea are such a good duo. But Kancey has not been able to stay healthy throughout his career. He has missed multiple games every single year. It's not his fault, but when you're looking at the team as a whole and you see a guy that you cannot rely on to stay on the field because he does keep getting injured, that's a problem. That is a serious, serious problem. So fingers crossed that we are going to get some good news about Calijah Kancey and that it's not the worst case scenario and that there will be some hope that he's able to return before the season is over. But look, for a game that started off looking like it was going to be a shootout, this one was dominated by the defenses after they settled into the game. 7 combined sacks, and then the teams combined for 13 penalties and 90 penalty yards. It was ugly, just like last week was ugly. But an ugly win is better than a pretty loss. So I know all of you are excited that once again the Buccaneers have started off 2-0. Hopefully they actually start 3-0 this time. They get the Jets this week, but with as beaten and battered and bruised as they all are, that's going to be an interesting matchup. We're going to have to see these injury reports as they start to roll in. I want to jump into the chat. Lakita says Malk was limping as well. Yeah, I mean, that Houston front four is so incredible and so talented that they were really having their way with the Bucs offensive line for most of that game. But yeah, I got to agree with Fausto in here. Heck started slow, but ultimately had a big game. I would agree. The very first snap that Heck was on the field, he got absolutely torched. I believe it was Will Anderson that was lined up against him, and it was a full-blown Matador Olay. Just let him go right on by. And that, to me, that was a bad sign. So I liked the way that Heck was able to bounce back and really start to settle in and find his rhythm and his groove. Liam, pass rush looked good on third down. It had its ups and downs. I'm going to talk more about the pass rush in just a little bit. So I love that you brought that up. So it was very up and down. But I thought Bowles really started to find the right combination in the second half to stifle what Houston was able to do offensively. Richard in the chat, Cancey feels like Gerald McCoy 2.0. I don't know if I'm going to fully agree with that. I think Cancey's upside is much higher, but I also think Gerald McCoy doesn't exactly get the recognition and the respect that he probably deserves for as well as he played on some really, really just god-awful, terrible football teams. So, again, fingers crossed that we're going to get some good news about Calijah Kancey here in the next day or two. All right. We are going to have the biggest takeaways. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else. From footwork to breath work, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings this same intention to how they craft every single model. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard on every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. I linked all my accounts to Monarch and immediately spotted a few subscriptions that I wasn't even using anymore. Canceling those alone saved me money every month. Don't let your financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. My biggest takeaways in this one. Number one, the run game is alive and well. When Goedeke went down, the Bucs really started to get the run game going. Rashad averaged 6.5 yards a carry. Bucky was up over 4. They combined for over 130 yards on the ground, while Baker added another 33. This is what I meant by attacking Houston's speed and aggression on defense. But the Bucs did it in a different way than I anticipated. I mentioned on my preview, I wanted to see the Bucs throw those quick passes to their receivers, which they did do quite a bit, but I wanted to see them counter that aggressiveness and that speed of the Houston front four by getting the ball in the hands of Emeka Egbuka and Tez Johnson, who was a healthy scratch. Get it to Shep, get it to Bucky, get it to Rashad in the passing game, because you counter speed with speed. That was my way of thinking there. So that aggression and that speed of the Houston front four actually allowed the running backs to get upfield quickly because there was no contain on the edges. That turned into some big chunk plays, especially for Rashad on the drive where McLaughlin missed that field goal. This is the 10th time since the start of last season that the Bucs have gone over 100 yards as a team on the ground. That is the 4th most in the NFL over that span. The run game literally saved them in this one. Right before I went live, I was talking to my son about it, and he was talking about how Bucky was a dog and Rashad was a dog, and that, without the run game, the Bucs don't win. And I said, you're 100% right. I said, I'm getting ready to talk about it on my show. The run game is the reason the Bucs were able to stay in it and the reason that they were able to win it. Takeaway number 2, and I'm sorry, now I can't remember who mentioned it in the chat about the pass rush. I think it was Liam. Liam might have mentioned it, but the pass rush still wasn't great for much of the game, and losing Calijah Cancey makes it worse. Now, Stroud was only 13 for 24, but it really felt like he had all day for a large chunk of this game to find guys down the field. I highlighted it on yesterday's episode. He only had 2 attempts of 20 yards or more last week against the Rams, and he was 0 for 2 with an interception on those attempts. There were multiple big plays for the Texans offense in this one. I also don't understand dropping Reddick into coverage on third downs. I mean, it could be a disguise thing, could be a strategy thing to try to bait Stroud into making a mistake where, you know, he gets the pre-snap read and he thinks that Reddick is coming, and then all of a sudden Reddick drops back. He doesn't realize it and ends up throwing an interception or something to that effect. Bowles would never tell anybody outside of that building the truth about it. He certainly knows more about defense than I do. It just doesn't seem to make any sense to pay Reddick all this money to be your alpha edge rusher and then not have him pursue the quarterback on the most important down that you have as a defense. Vea did not look great in this game from a pass rush standpoint. He was handled much of the night by a backup center. Granted, he was being double teamed for pretty much the entire game, but the other guys needed to take advantage of that. Greg Gaines looked outstanding. Anthony Nelson was getting past the line and creating problems for Stroud. But this was a disappointing performance for the most part. I expected much better. And if the Bucs are going to be contenders, they have to be much better. All right. It's time to talk about it. Takeaway number 3. Kicker is going to be a problem. Chase McLaughlin missed yet another field goal in this game. That's 3 misses in 2 games if you include the extra point. You absolutely cannot have that. The Bucs paid McLaughlin because he looked like he was their kicker. He looked like he was nails from pretty much anywhere on the field. They looked to have finally figured out their kicker and punter situations, and instead, the kicker has lost it. I said on Twitter that the Bucs obviously cannot have a good punter and a good kicker at the same time. It's just, apparently it's against the rules. We're not allowed to have nice things. McLaughlin hadn't missed a kick inside of 40 yards since 2022 when he was with the Indianapolis Colts. Ironically, that was also the last time that he missed more than 2 kicks in a season. Now he's missed 2 field goals and 1 extra point, and we are 2 games in. I do kind of believe that the Bucs' decision to go for 2 at the end of regulation was because they didn't trust McLaughlin to make the extra point. The Bucs already had a punt blocked in this game, and I feel that in that situation, I could be wrong. Maybe Bowles addressed this. I don't know. I didn't see much of anything outside of his comments about Cancey in terms of his post-game availability. But I think that Bowles' decision there was because he trusted his offense to maybe get 2, but at the very least, not give up 2 in that situation. Having already seen a punt blocked, and McLaughlin is now in his own head, if that extra point gets blocked and they scoop it up and they score, the Texans win this game by a point. They're outside of that, there really wasn't any logical reason to go for 2 in that situation because there wasn't enough time left. There was only 6 seconds. So that's not enough time to return the kick. And then even if the kick went into the end zone and they down it, that's still not enough time to push the ball that far down the field and call a timeout and try a kick by Fairbairn. It just mathematically, there was not enough time for Houston to be able to try a field goal. So I feel like the only logical reason there is that they didn't trust McLaughlin to go out there and kick it. So do not be surprised at all if the Bucs bring in a kicker to work out with the team this week. We just saw it happen with Younghoe Koo in Atlanta. Kicking overall this season across the league has been down, but this situation is going to end up costing the Bucs a game if they don't get it figured out in a hurry. And I hope it's McLaughlin that gets it figured out, because it's above the shoulders right now. He's in his own head and he's got the yips. So I want him to get it figured out. I refuse to call him by his Locked On Bucs nickname moving forward until he shows that he has figured it out. I'm going to jump into the chat really super quick. HBK says, James, it's like the injury bug lives rent-free around us. Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's never ending, and it's really frustrating. We have Richard in the chat says, Bucs special teams historically has been on the wrong side of special. That might be the best way that I have seen it put the entire span of my coverage of this team. Let's see. Mikey says Chase was money last year. This is crazy. Absolutely. There's no doubt about it that this really is very strange how this has happened. Hello says they did that because a field goal would have tied it. If we didn't go for two and they got a field goal, they would win. It was the right call, but there wasn't enough time. There was not enough time for them to get into field goal range. That's my point. If there was 10 seconds left, okay, I get it. 15 seconds left, absolutely. 6 seconds, you do not have enough time to push the ball, even on a touchback. If you're starting at the 35, you don't have enough time to get the ball to the other 35 for a makeable, even the 40, for a makeable field goal and still call timeout. That is my main point. All right, we have game balls coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel is where I always go to place all my parlays, my prop bets, my game bets for just about every sport, and it definitely adds a little bit of spice to your NFL Sundays. Like I mentioned, my buddies and I, we have a 5-man group chat where we put together a 10-leg parlay as a group every single week, and it is a blast watching these games and rooting for those to hit. No line yet for the Buccaneers and the Jets in the Bucs home opener this weekend, but the Bucs are now minus 180 to win the NFC South, minus 325 to make the playoffs, and plus 2,500 to win the Super Bowl, trailing the Commanders, Rams, Chargers, and Niners. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Wrapping things up here on a live post-game reaction primetime episode of Locked On Bucs. And it's time to hand out game balls. You guys know how to do this. Go ahead and start dropping your game balls in the chat. I will get to as many of those as possible. The first one handed out, it's the golden game ball. It's going to Bucky Irving in this one. 17 carries for 71 yards, had another 50 yards on 6 receptions. He was a spark plug for the Buccaneers in this one. He was getting tough yards. He was taking rough hits. By the way, Houston might be the hardest hitting team in the NFL. My goodness. I just could not believe the pop that they had on every single hit. That was a physically punishing game that the Bucs just went through. But Bucky Irving was absolutely crucial for the Bucs, especially on that game-winning drive. I highlighted it at the top of the show. After Baker got that 4th down conversion, then all of a sudden Bucky got the ball. I think it was back-to-back plays after K. Otten got a catch. He had a huge chunk play of like 23 yards because he was doing Bucky Irving things. He was making guys miss like crazy and picking up big yardage. He should have another good week against the Jets, but the Bucs have to get this offensive line in better shape. Baker was beaten half to death in this game. I'm not sure Goedeke is going to be able to bounce back on a short week. If that's the case, we are going to need to see another game like this from Bucky to keep those wins coming. Game ball number 2, and my first one on the defensive side of the ball, I'm giving it to Greg Gaines. Man, shout out to Gaines because he stepped up after Cancey went down and really gave this defense a little bit of juice. Now, the stats aren't going to show the full effect that he had. He only finished with the 1 sack. That was his only tackle. But the pressure that he was generating when he was on the field and the lanes that he was able to create by winning his one-on-ones started to open some things up for this Buccaneers pass rush. He was doing what I expected Vea to do in this game. But the Texans were so consumed with stopping Vita that Gaines was able to create opportunities for other guys on the field. He's going to have to play a big role moving forward with Cancey likely missing extended time, which is exactly what I expect to happen there. Game ball number 3. And my second one on the offensive side, Rachaad White. Now, I wanted to give this to Baker. I really, really did. Another fourth quarter game-winning drive on the road, snapped his 7-game losing streak on Monday Night Football, snapped the Bucs' 5-game losing streak against the Houston Texans, but Rachaad deserves some flowers here. 10 carries for 65 yards and the game-winning touchdown. On top of that, had a potentially game-saving fumble recovery where he was injured on the play. Now, I couldn't tell if he took a shot to the ribs or if it was the lower back, but he laid out and he sacrificed his body to try to save that game. He came up so big in the run game and as a pass blocker that I felt I just had to give him the nod over Baker. Of course, after Rachaad recovered that fumble, the Bucs had to punt. Then there was a blatant block in the back that a flag was thrown, but then they picked it up anyway, and Houston ended up scoring on the drive. But because of that sequence of events, they left Baker too much time. Can't do that. You can't leave Baker 2 minutes and 10 seconds with 3 timeouts. You're going to lose. That's how it is. Those are the rules. I don't make them. I just follow them. And if you leave Baker that kind of time, he's going to beat you. That's how it is. Game ball number 4, my other one on the defensive side of the ball, Tyke Smith. Once again, he was all over the field. He had a huge sack, 2 tackles for loss. He led the team in tackles with 6 on the night. There weren't really a lot of other defensive players that stood out. So Tyke had that clutch sack on 3rd down, really showed some growth in his role in the defense. But you take a look around the defensive landscape. Levante, he had a sack, but then he drops an interception. He got burned by Dalton Schultz twice. And Dalton Schultz, I might be able to beat Dalton Schultz in a 40-yard dash. There was no reason that Levante should have been beat. He did not have a good game. McCollum, he gave up that early touchdown. I thought that was more about a great pass and an even better catch. But McCollum wasn't overly impressive in this game. Reddick and Diaby were quiet. I'm not going to say that they were bad, but they were quiet. Vea was quiet. Voss did look better. Still a long way to go in coverage for him. Liked what I saw out of Ben Morrison. Benjamin Morrison, he and Dean were kind of bouncing in and out. But when Morrison was covering Nico Collins, 0 receptions. He got a ticky-tack call that was nowhere close to as egregious as Derek Stingley's interference on Mike Evans on what should have been a first down reception. But I digress. I'm not going to rant about the officials. But I do have to say that Tyke was a major bright spot for the defense in this game. I'm going to go to the chat, and I see Lakita in here, and I apologize. I don't ever do this on this show, but I have to pull out my phone because I need to make sure that I do this the right way. Lakita says, game ball to you, James. for eggs and bacon. Yes, I referred to the duo of Goedeke and Baker Mayfield on Twitter as eggs and bacon. I cannot take full credit for this. This was actually from, and I apologize if I butcher your name, James Plachta or Plachta. He reached out to me and he said that. And I said, you know what? That's going to be a thing. Just like Locked On Bucs started the whole Himfield thing, I'm going to take James' brilliant idea here. We're going to make that a thing. So anytime there's a touchdown between Goedeke and Baker, we are calling that eggs and bacon from now on. Anyway, your guys' game balls. Destined for greatness. Baker, Bucky, and then White and Grizz the Wiz. I like that. Mr. King says, no one on special teams, fire them all. Well, I don't want to fire them all. Riley Dixon is still really good. The blocked punt was not his fault by any means, but the special teams coverage was not good in this game. McLaughlin, obviously not good in this game, but I'm not going to fire everybody. There does need to be some work done. Fausto says Baker and Rashad, and then Gray Gaines and Christian Izzian. Izzian's another great one. Izzian did have a phenomenal special teams play. That was really the lone bright spot for the special teams in this one. So yeah, I do like that. Victor says, should this be a concern for Mike Evans' 1,000-yard goal by going into week 3? No. So Evans finished with 56 yards in this game. After week 1, if I remember correctly, he only had to average like 51 a game in order to reach the 1,000-yard mark. So no, don't be worried about that right now. Not in week 2. We know that Evans is going to pop off for like $140 in the next week or two. King James 813, appreciate the credit on that. King James, he was the one that reached out to me about eggs and bacon. Shout out to him in the chat. Let's see. A couple more game balls. Golden game ball from Richard goes to Kevin Carberry. I like that a lot. Let's see. Tony says Rashad White. Let's see. Richard, game ball for Rashad for sure. Game winner, saves the fumble recovery. And then Richard also said that loose cannons would not approve of the Gaines game ball. I don't care. They can disapprove all they want. I'm friends with those guys over there. We get along really well. They don't agree. They don't agree. That's their opinion. This is my show. So whatever. Last one. Aaron. Yeah, I feel that Evans is going to torch the Jets. I get that feeling too. I really, really do. All right. We are going to get out of here. That is going to do it for this episode. Coming up tomorrow, we'll be back with Evan Klosky. It's a quick turn of the page. It's a short week. We're going to get his thoughts on the win over the Texans since he picked the Bucs to lose this game. Just saying. And then we're going to turn the page and we are going to start looking at the Jets game. Until then, please make sure you are subscribed on YouTube with the notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Follow on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @Yarcho_Bucs. Follow on Instagram and TikTok at Locked On Bucs in both of those places. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. If you want to support the show, but you don't want to be an insider, although you should because it's a lot of fun, it's real simple. Like this episode on YouTube, leave a 5-star review wherever you get podcasts. It does help other Buccaneers fans find the show. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding Victory Tuesday. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.